Good afternoon, Governor. This is Governor Scott of the Palm Beach Post. Would you like to make an opening remark before we start questioning?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for the opportunity to be here. As you probably know, my background is I was born in Illinois. I lived in public housing when I started school. My dad was a bus driver, then a truck driver, and basically I was in the Navy. And basically since then I've sort of been in business. I bought companies, built companies, and so as you know, I decided to run now a year and a half ago. And the reason I ran is I was concerned about the direction of the state and country. That I've always believed that if you cannot get jobs, if you don't build jobs, it's very difficult to build families. So that's why I ran. You probably saw a few ads. 7 steps to 7,000 jobs. Basically, get the state back to work. And so what I've tried to do is think of my job in 3 ways. Step one, try not have government be doing things that raises the cost of living in the state. 2, at the same time on that, you can't do things that artificially keep prices low because long term will catch up with you. 2, make sure that children can get an education, because I was able to get ahead because I was able to get an education. And then 3, make sure that people can get jobs. The biggest problem we have in our state is jobs. So as you know, the last session we went into, we had put a lot of effort into education. We reduced taxes, property taxes, the business tax for smaller companies. We balanced the budget, and that's not. I'm going through the same issue again because last time I walked in, the first session, I walked into over a $3 billion budget deficit. This time it's about a $2 billion budget deficit. So similar issues. And what's hard is that the big money, as you know, in the budget is either education or healthcare. 2 very important areas. So this session, I've put a lot of effort into growing jobs, and the positive so far is that we've generated, private sector has generated in 9 months 110,300 private sector jobs. We'll know October's numbers tomorrow. Sort of my report card is the 3rd Friday of every month. The negative is, and unemployment's gone from 12% down to 10.6. The negative is we still have 900,000 people out of work. So there's a lot of people still out of work in the state. This session it's going to be the legislature is going to focus on redistricting. They're going to spend a lot of their time on redistricting, which is spent a lot of time this off session. But the things that I'm going to focus on is step 1. I put out my issues again, and it's basically make sure we streamline the permitting process to the extent we can, get rid of regulations that skill in jobs, and make sure workforce boards actually are helping people get jobs, change our unemployment system to a reemployment system where we really focus on getting people jobs. The focus are all of our education as much as possible on the science, technology, engineering, and math. We continue to reduce the business tax for smaller companies and start the process hopefully of reducing the tangible personal property tax for smaller companies because that's where the jobs are going to come from. As you know, I've done 3 trade missions. I did Panama in March, and that was a focus on our shipping, which should be a big opportunity. Canada in June, which is one of our bigger trading partners. A lot of tourism here, a lot of housing buying here, plus a lot of companies. And then Brazil, which is our biggest trading partner and our biggest country of origin for tourists, other than Canada. So that's pretty much what the focus is right now.
Okay. Let's start with kind of an all-encompassing question. With a little bit of an assist from a reader, Marie Gottfried. You have talked about a lot of these ideas during your campaign, during your first session, yet to use a CEO business type analogy that you'd appreciate, after 4 months your customer approval rating was 29%. You changed your leadership, and we wondered if this was sort of a rebranding. And Ms. Gottfried asked specifically, in light of the fact that currently only 36% of Floridians approve of your actions, do you have any intention to adjust your policy to bring them more in line with those desired by your constituents?
Well, here's what I think about this job. I think about it in 3 areas. Keep the cost of living as low as possible, focus on education, and focus on job growth. That's the biggest issues we have in the state. So my job is, and I ran on a very specific campaign. I mean, it was you can go back and look at everything I said. Look on the that I had a plan, 7 steps to 7,000 jobs. That's what I ran on, and that's what I'm going to do. I believe that that's what's going to get our state back to work. That's what's going to change people's lives.
Right. If I may, but why then was your approval rating so low so soon?
And that, I mean, my focus is doing what I said I was going to do in the campaign. I mean, the approval rating is not something. I mean, my job is to make sure this is the state that people say, if I'm going to build a business, they're going to build it in Florida. That's my focus.
Okay. But then, do you intend to change your policies?
No.
Okay. Stacy?
Now, somebody, somebody comes up with a better idea of how to get the state back to work. I mean, I'm very comfortable that my 7 steps to 7,000 jobs is what's going to get our state back to work, and it's working, and that's what I'm continuing to do. If there's some other issue that people have that, but my focus is going to be on job growth.
Okay.
Related to your cost of living point, several readers were describing how difficult it is for them to afford health care right now, and that they see the Affordable Care Act as offering them the opportunity for an easier chance at getting health care at a cost they can afford. For example, Marcia Wagshaw in Lake Worth is a small business owner, she's a CPA. She says she's paying 40% more in health care premiums than a large group employer pays. She'd love to hire more people, but she can't afford it. The Affordable Care Act is going to lower her premiums through competitive exchanges. She asks, why are you in the state of Florida fighting against implementing? And I guess as a follow-up, I'd ask you to tell us more about your ideas for if the Supreme Court overturns the Affordable Care Act, how do we make health care accessible for Marcia Wagshaw?
Well, the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, is an absolute disaster for patients. If you look at every government-run health care in the world, it does 3 things. It overpromises, it always runs out of money, and so it always underpays providers, and so it always ends up rationing care. I've never found one in the world, and maybe somebody else can find one. So what this act is actually going to do is cause the cost of health care to go up. It already has. It's going to ultimately ration care. The dramatic expansion of the obligations of the states for Medicaid is something that will kill jobs. We will, the cost to employers is going to put us at a significant competitive disadvantage. If you think about it, when people go shop, they don't say, if it's the product's the same, they're not saying, okay, I'll pay more for a product made in one place than another because taxes are higher, regulations higher, or more, permitting takes longer, or there's more risk of litigation. So when people shop, if they can buy a product from another country that doesn't have Obamacare, then they're going to do it. People do it every day. So if we wanted to fix healthcare, we would do these things. Step 1, people should know what healthcare costs. Step 2, we should have more competition. Step 3, individuals ought to get the same tax breaks as employers, so they own their own policy, like they own their own life insurance policy. And 4, they ought to get a lower price for their insurance if they don't smoke, they eat right, and they exercise. If we did those things, the usage of healthcare would come down, the cost of healthcare would come down. That would have a dramatic impact on individuals' ability to buy healthcare. We would have fewer uninsured. It would have a dramatic positive impact. But there's no way that we can afford that bill.
As a follow-up, one of the main drivers of healthcare costs is consolidation in hospital ownership. From what I've been reading, you're looking at privatizing potentially publicly owned hospitals. Are you not? How do you deal with this issue of consolidation and increased cost?
Well, I think there's a report that's going to, there's a commission that I appointed back in January, and I think it's December 1st they come out with a report about the hospitals that are tax supported. So we'll see then what recommendations they make.
Governor, in that healthcare law, there are now cancer screenings. People are able to have their children on their policies until age 26. There are no restrictions for pre-existing conditions, and the donut hole in Medicare Part D is phased out. Do you disagree with any of those things?
But look,
Would you not want those to happen?
In any bill, there's things that are nice to have, but you look at that bill overall, and the bill is going to ration care.
But care is rationed now. Private healthcare companies say you can or cannot have a service, or you can or cannot go to a certain doctor. Would you acknowledge that that happens now? That the healthcare is rationed now by private industry?
Well,
that competes with each other?
The way healthcare works.
I'm sorry. Is healthcare rationed now?
I'll be glad to answer the question.
Okay.
But let me answer. Go ahead and answer it. Okay. If we want to fix healthcare where people can afford it, all right, we have to do the things that work in other areas. Okay. Individuals have to make sure they spend the dollars well. So you've got to have an individual have some involvement in the decision. So first off, they need to know what things cost. Going back to the point about consolidation, we need to have more competition. I mean, historically, competition in most industries reduces the cost of things, makes service better, and generally improves quality. So we need to have more competition. If you own your own policy, you'll pick and choose. Like you might believe in, let's take chiropractor. You might believe in it. Somebody else might not. But the way we do it now is we require people to buy things that they don't necessarily want. That raises the cost. On top of that, if you owned your own policy, just like if you owned your own life insurance policy all your life, pre-existing condition wouldn't matter.
You're talking about eliminating employer-provided health care? What do you mean?
No, you can do that, but if you bought your own policy, then if you bought your policy at 25, and then at 40 you ended up with a disease, there's no issue of a pre-existing condition. But that would stop this issue of being forced to stay in one job rather than change jobs because you're tied to your employer's policy. Now, if you want to rely on your employer's policy, that's great. But it would be better for individuals to own their own policy, buy what they want, and then not be tied to a job just because they might lose insurance.
Governor, you have not answered the question that Randy asked. He asked, do you believe that health care is rationed now? I think that's a yes or no. Yes or no?
What I believe is that people buy insurance.
Yes or no? Is health care being rationed now?
Can we go to the next question? Well, I'm not telling you my answer.
No,
okay.
No, you really
It's a yes or no
you really
question.
Because we were asking, this is actually a big subject of debate when Congress was discussing the law, and the question of rationing comes up, and right now, people who have private health care are told yes or no, you can or cannot have this service, and you cannot.
But they buy it. That's the health care they buy. It's a health care that they choose to buy.
So are you saying that you don't think that rationing happens now, or you do?
I'm saying that an individual decides what policy they want to own. Okay, employers give you an option. Okay, now your option could be that you want to have a policy that doesn't have restrictions, or a policy that does. They cost different amounts of money.
Okay, so we're not going to get an answer to that question. Practically speaking, from Florida's standpoint, if the law is upheld in whole or in part, you'll have to go along. And right now, Florida has pretty much not done any of the things that some states are doing to implement the law. Will you implement the law if the Supreme Court upholds all or part of it?
If it's the law of the land, of course.
Okay. And will Florida be at a disadvantage if it's not ready?
If it's the law of the land, we'll be ready.
How will you be ready? The state's rejected over $100 million in grants that have been offered the state to prepare for the law. But if you haven't prepared for the law, if it's held up, how will you then pay for those things that are required to implement the law?
Well, it's my job, if it's the law of the country, to be ready when it's the law.
So where will you find the money to replace the money you haven't taken?
Well, when it's the law of the land, we'll implement the law.
Where will you find the money?
Well, it'll be part of our budget.
You're already facing a $2 billion budget gap. So why not take the money that the federal government is offering you now so you can be prepared?
Because it's not the law of the land. I don't believe it'll ever become the law of the land. It's not what
It is the law of the land.
Okay. If you look at what we're trying to do in healthcare in Florida, we have a plan. We passed a very successful Medicaid bill that will actually improve healthcare for the Medicaid recipients. We're sitting and waiting on the federal government to give there's two different waivers. One for the waiver of a plan that we've implemented over 5 years ago that has worked. So that's what my focus is. Now, if at the time that a federal law is something that we have to comply with, we will.
It's looking less and less likely that you might get that waiver from Health and Human Services. So is there a plan B for the state if you can't institute Medicaid managed care?
Well, I'm very hopeful. I think we'll get it. I think it makes all the sense in the world. It fits exactly what CMS would like. I mean, they want quality health care. They want people to have access to health care. They want to control the cost of health care. It does all those things. So I'm very comfortable we'll get the waiver.
Actually, Governor, there are studies that show it has decreased access and that it hasn't saved any money and that it actually hasn't been successful.
I believe that it has improved access, controlled cost, and improved quality.
Jack?
Governor, if the legislature passes a bill to allow 3 destination resort casinos in South Florida, will you sign it?
I have to look at it at the time. I know there'll be a big discussion. We've got to deal with the impact on the Seminole Compact, the impact on the parimutuels, and how dependent it makes the state on gaming. So, but I'll decide at the time.
Would the deal have to save the parimutuels or the Seminole gambling revenues?
I'll look at that one and pass. I mean, there's so many hypotheticals.
The supporters of the sponsors of the bill have said that it is not an expansion of gambling, that they actually think that this is a way to decrease gambling. Do you agree with that, if you're adding big casinos like that?
I've not seen how it would decrease gaming.
Right. But do you have any thoughts at all for guidance for the legislature? Because if you're not going to sign it, one wonders why they'll bother with even passing it. Do you like the idea of those size casinos in Florida?
What I've said to the legislature and all along, and I said in my campaign, is I don't want the state to be significantly dependent on gaming from a financial standpoint. So that, now there's going to be a lot of discussions, and if they get to a bill, I'll look at it then.
Have you been to the Seminole casinos here in Florida?
I went to, I've been over to I went to just an event over at the one in Tampa.
You haven't put any of your money in the slots?
No, I don't want to lose money. I don't gamble.
Do you think the opponents of the bill say that, and this is in line with a comment you made just a few minutes ago, that the way Florida is going with all the biotech money the state has put in, with the emphasis on what they call knowledge jobs, the casinos are at odds with that sort of economic model for the state. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I think the issue is totally separate. I mean, my job is to focus on the areas where we can grow jobs. The gaming issue is a totally separate issue for me.
Well, do you think that they will cannibalize existing jobs from hotels and restaurants?
I've not seen any studies that would suggest that.
George?
Let me ask about immigration. In the governor's primary, the issue that really, where your campaign really started to take off, is where you promised to bring an Arizona-style immigration law to Florida. Not much emphasis on it in the general election, and then in this past session, the legislature didn't pass a significant immigration reform along those lines. You have a lot of people, certainly in the Republican Party, that want to have a hardline immigration law. And then you also have a lot of business interests that prevailed last time that don't like the idea of E-Verify and making agriculture and hospitality, don't like the stringent immigration. Can you give me your, has your thinking on immigration changed at all, or do you want to bring an Arizona-style law here?
Here's what I think. I think that, it's frustrating because the federal government hasn't done their job. Secure the borders, come up with a immigration policy that people that live in our country understand and agree with, and people who want to immigrate to our country understand. And then 3, they need to come up with a worker visa program that doesn't put our companies at a disadvantage to foreign companies. Now, to the extent that it's not going to happen, and then I believe that if somebody is in our state and they violate our laws, we ought to be able to ask them if they're legal or not. No different than you're asked if you for your ID. Now, at the same time, it doesn't appear that there's anything will come out of the legislature with regard to that.
So you don't plan to make it a priority in the coming session, or?
Governor only gets to sign or not sign bills. So.
Well, but you have some influence. If you say something's a priority, but you're not planning to make it a priority.
What I've said all along is that the federal government ought to do their job. To the extent they're not, then we ought to have a bill that says that if you're doing something illegal and you're stopped, you ought to be able to ask if you're legal or not.
Okay, good. Thank you. I was going to clarify that because the law Alabama passed allows local law enforcement to check immigration status without stopping somebody for another violation. You do not support that.
I don't support anything that looks like racial profiling or anything like that.
So you would only make it as to use a traffic term, a secondary type thing, where somebody is.
If you're violating our law,
and you would ask about immigration status.
Right.
Okay.
But really the key is the big things are the federal government ought to do their job, because if we do that, I think a lot of things will get resolved.
But do you know anything about the law Alabama passed?
A little bit. Read about it.
You think it's hurt the state?
I haven't seen the numbers.
Okay. Christine?
I want to ask you about the overlays. You went up to Washington last month and unveiled your plan. And your plan has a lot of specific details about projects that we need to clean the water, clean the nutrients from the water. But it has no restrictions on the polluters. And there are people who would say it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend billions of dollars cleaning pollution from the water if we're not going to restrict the polluters from putting the pollution into the water. So why does your plan not have any restrictions on polluters or requiring the polluters to pay more to clean up their mess?
Well, first off, our Department of Environmental Protection should be focused and is focused on people that are polluting. This plan is a plan to deal with 2 issues. One, the quality of the water, and 2, the flow of the water. Now, my belief is that we will be able to come to an agreement. I think the EPA, Justice, Interior, Army Corps of Engineers has a similar goal. My experience in business is the way you get something accomplished is you sit down and somebody makes a proposal, you understand what the other people believe, think about it, and you see how you can come to common ground. But I believe we have the same goal, so I'm very optimistic. But with regard to anybody that is doing the wrong thing, today, environmental protection ought to be dealing with that.
But you really haven't answered the question. I know you're interested in water quality, but water quality goes directly to who's putting the pollutants into the water. And there are ways to restrict polluters from putting pollutants into the water. And the judges have specifically said in these cases that they want to see more of what's called source controls. But we don't see that in your plan. Are you anticipating any controls on primarily agriculture who've been responsible for a lot of the pollution?
Well, what we're presently working on is areas where, let's say farmers, where they have done the things that we believe would have an impact, but for whatever reason, that land, it doesn't have the same positive impact. And so, to look at where we can do treatment areas, just where the flow is south of them, to try to deal with that. So we have plans to do that already.
Rhonda.
Governor, you have said that you're going to make higher education a priority going forth. Can you tell us, do you want to eliminate tenure for faculty in the state university system, and if so, why do you?
Okay. Here's what I've done so far. First off, in picking trustees, what I've done is I've sent them a copy of a proposal that Texas had, and to see how they thought about things. Because what I want to appoint are individuals that are trustees that are going to really look at how we can dramatically improve our higher ed. Then back first part of October, I've asked, and I've just been getting it this week, the information about our success in getting students jobs. Are we doing the right type of degrees? Are we fulfilling an employer's needs? Are we getting a good bang for a buck? And then when people have come in and talked to me, I've said, let's take all these areas, whether it's tenure, whether it's who should measure our professors, merit pay, all these things. What makes sense? But I don't know. I don't have a plan to get rid of tenure. What I have a plan for is we've got to move, and whether it's, and this is true for K-12, state college, universities, we've got to move to where our students know where the jobs are. And more of them get jobs in the areas that are tied to science, technology, engineering, and math, because it's not fair for these students to finish and say, "Gosh, I just finished my 4 years. I have a certain amount of debt, and there's no jobs in that area." So what I want to make sure that our students know where the jobs are, that we spend as much of our resources as possible in the areas where our students can get jobs.
Okay. You also have said that you are against tuition increases. Can you explain why that is, given all of the cuts, 27% in the last 5 years to the university's base budget? You oppose tuition increases when we rank 48th in the nation for tuition.
What I'm focused on is no different than what you have to do in business. What you have to do in business is your first focus is not how do I raise my prices. Your first focus is can I do a better job with less money. So the first thing is let's before we sit and say, oh gosh, we're going to raise prices. First thing we ought to be doing is saying, is there a way to provide the service we want to provide, the education we want to provide to these students at a lower price? Not the first thing being, gosh, let's raise tuition constantly. Because the problem we have is that our students, struggle to pay for whether it's state college or our universities. And so I want to focus on how do we keep the cost of higher ed as low as we can. If it means that we have to have tuition increases, that's fine, but that's not the first thing we should be doing. The first thing we should be doing is step back and do exactly what business has to do and say, can we provide a better product, in this case education, at a lower price?
Students are also struggling with access to get into college these days because of the crowded classrooms, because there's not enough money to provide what they can. So Florida's already struggling in a system that hasn't adequately funded education. So do we really need to look at how we can lower the price when it's already been at rock bottom for many, many years?
I think that no different than what every company has to do. The easiest thing in business is always raise your prices. The hardest thing is to figure out how to do things more efficiently. If you're in a lot of businesses, especially manufacturing in this country, you have to lower your prices every year. You have to figure out how to create efficiencies. You would think that with technology, with the internet, that we should be able to figure out how to provide a great education for our students using more technology, using more the internet more, things like that, and not constantly raise prices.
Why should government operate like a business? It provides many, many services that businesses don't provide.
Well, here's what successful businesses have to do. Successful businesses are very focused on a mission. They're very focused on looking at how do they provide whatever product they service that they can at a price that people can afford. taxpayers expect the same thing out of business, out of government. They expect that government doesn't waste money, that government provides whatever service they're going to provide at the best price they can. And so you should hope that government works like a business. From the standpoint, successful businesses have a mission. They watch out what things cost. They're focused on price. They're focused on quality. They're focused on access. That's the exact same thing government ought to be doing.
Governor, on education, I have a question from a reader, Samuel Spitali. He says that, this is on K-12, he says merit pay has yet to be proven to have any effect on student achievement. In a study recently completed by the National Center on Performance Incentives at Vanderbilt, offering bonuses to teachers failed to raise test scores. In light of the evidence, why did you feel compelled to endorse merit pay for Florida public school teachers?
I believe rewarding effective individuals works. And I'm very comfortable that if you create a fair merit pay system, that you will be able to reward effective teachers, you will incentivize effective teachers, you'll keep effective teachers, and it'll absolutely work.
Well, some people who have reviewed the attempts to create this fair system of evaluation say it's very complicated, it doesn't measure some things, it blames teachers for things that are beyond their control. And how do you know that this system is going to be fair?
People say the exact same thing in business. In business, they say the exact same thing. Every merit pay system is unfair. You're not measuring the right things. But constantly, what you have to do in business, and you should do it in government, you should say, okay, so how do I constantly improve the merit pay system? Whatever we're going to measure, you look in what you're doing and say, how can I do that better? You listen. One thing I do is I travel the state and talk to teachers. I say, if you have a better way of measurement, then give it to me. But in my case, I'm very comfortable that rewarding effective individuals works.
But if you're a teacher of music or art, and your evaluation is based on how students do on the FCAT reading, which is what they're doing, they don't give the FCAT in every subject, then how is that?
You wouldn't do it that way.
Well, they are going to do it. No, they are going to do it that way.
Okay, then you should change it.
Well, it hasn't started yet. But I mean, have you looked at the way that they're going to do this? Have you looked in detail at it?
Sure. I mean, and you know what? In every part of government, what I ask people is, I said, look, just because we did it this way and we started down a path this way, if there's a better way of doing it, I want to change. It's exactly the same thing you do in business. If you didn't change in business, you would be out of business.
The state provides vouchers for public school students. Should teachers in those private schools that use public school vouchers, should they have to be evaluated according to this system, and should they have to take the FCAT?
Well, I think that everybody ought to be measured, right? And if it's no different than in business, if you measure people doing the exact same service, they ought to get measured similarly.
So would you require public schools and private schools to use the same teacher evaluation system if the private schools are using state vouchers?
I believe that there ought to be a similar measurement system for anybody getting state funding.
Are you going to make a proposal for universal public school vouchers?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay. When do you think you'll be deciding?
Whenever I decide.
Okay. Well, I mean, will it be, if you decide to do it, will it be for the next legislative session?
I haven't decided.
Okay. Next year? 2 years from now? 3 weeks? And do you know what the plan would look like?
Not yet.
Okay. Why do you even like the idea of universal public school vouchers?
I believe in choice. I believe that no different than people have a choice in where they buy their clothes, what restaurants they go to. I think choice dramatically will improve the education system, because I believe that no different than, in my case, my daughters were different. They ultimately went to different schools. That parents should have as much choice as possible. I don't think you should be stuck in going to one school just because you live on that street versus another street.
Well, that really doesn't happen in this county. You know, we have all kinds of choices. We have lots of charter schools and career academies, but still, by far, you know, more than 90% of the kids are going to public schools. And I think it's fair to say that there's a feeling that you have some hostility toward traditional public schools.
Oh gosh,
do you?
You know, I think most kids are going to continue to go to traditional public schools, and traditional public schools do a great job. But I believe that parents ought to have choice. And you know, your child's going to be different than somebody else's child. And if you have two, they're probably different. And one school might be better. I mean, your one child might be more interested in certain subjects than the other one. And so one size doesn't fit all. But as a parent, you ought to be able to choose.
I have one more question about schools. Now I'm having a Rick Perry moment here.
Don't ever say three.
Yeah, that's what you have. Stacy, go ahead.
Oh, I really...
I said that when I said three. The second I think, oh gosh, I hope I remember my third.
I'm really intrigued by your comment about people owning their own insurance policies. It sounds to me like you've done a lot of thinking, public policy thought, formulating something along those lines and envisioning Florida post-Affordable Care Act. Can you please talk a little bit more about specifically how you would get there in Florida, what regulatory changes would need to happen, would there need to be changes in law, do you loosen restrictions on businesses? What happens to get us there?
Well, you know, I think the you know, some things are state, some things are some things are state, some things are federal. So the thing that had the biggest impact, allowing you to have a tax break, that's a federal issue. So the state can't have any impact on that other than suggested. But the other things the state can do is make sure individuals have more information on the cost of things. They can have an impact on making sure that there's competition.
Are you talking about asking the legislature to do something to require more disclosure on pricing?
That would be one way of doing it.
Is there any draft legislation out there?
No, not that I know of.
So how do you get there? How do you get to transparency on pricing?
Well, we'll get, you know, I mean, it'll get there, one, because consumers demand it. Right? So if it was, you demand price on everything else you buy. Right? So whether government gets involved or not, if you spend your own dollars, then you will demand price. You will demand more competition, and you will demand to be rewarded for doing the right things, by not smoking, by eating right, and by exercising. Now, government can be involved or not involved, but if it's your money, you're going to force those things.
Governor, here's the question. Where are you going to get the money to pay for merit pay? Right, schools have been lost about 8% this year, and it's not looking good for next year. So where do you get the money to?
It's going to be hard. I mean, this is, you know, we've got, I mean, almost a $2 billion budget deficit. The two big areas are education and healthcare, and so it's going to be very difficult.
Does that mean that this year, though, you will not accept any more cuts in education below the per pupil funding this year?
I'm going through, you know, the budget. I'll come out with my budget December. I think it's either December or 7th.
So you won't commit to holding education harmless?
My goal is that we, you know, the state funding for education at least stays where it is.
George?
The elections law that you signed this year puts a lot of restrictions on third-party voter registrations and limits, I guess, the number of days at early voting. There's a court challenge to it. Democrats say it's just an attempt to suppress Democratic registrations and turnout. Why was it necessary to have this law in Florida?
Well, look, what you expect is you expect an election system that works. This bill, you know, should help prevent fraud. With regard to the number of days of early voting, it's the same number of hours. It should be better because it's, you know, the hours are not just at times that people might not be able to vote. Now there'll be longer hours. So I think it's a law that's going to be good for Floridians. I think it's going to prevent fraud, and I think we'll see that hopefully early voting increases.
Do you have any examples of this fraud that we're trying to prevent?
Well, if you look at the way it was explained to me, if you look at that people were coming in without knowing how they were obtaining all the ballots and things like that, I think what this does is lets everybody know what's going on.
What do you mean they were coming in not knowing how to obtain a ballot?
Let me finish the story. I'll tell you an interesting story. I taught school last Thursday in Immokalee, and I taught a government class and economics at high school. I taught 7 hours of class, and I asked the students what they thought about elections, and it was interesting. And these were they were all seniors, and taught 2 different classes, but all of them thought they were shocked that I asked them if there should be any limitations on should government be involved in funding campaigns. They didn't think so. They didn't think they should have to disclose their contributions. They didn't think there should be limits on contributions. It was really interesting. So then I went through what the laws were, and they were surprised. So go back.
But the fraud, you said something about ballots. Could you just...
There's lots of stories about people coming in and no one knew where the ballots came from, the absentee ballots.
Where? So I don't understand. If you come in, you don't have an absentee ballot.
Well, they were brought in as groups.
This is in Florida? Well, but the law doesn't deal with absentee ballots. In fact, the only real election fraud in the last 15 years in Florida was in the late 90s in a Miami mayoral election that was rigged with absentee ballots, and the legislature has made no changes in absentee ballot law since then. That absentee ballots has nothing to do with third-party registration or early voting or any of the things that are in the law.
It went all to, how do people first get registered, and then how do they end up getting the absentee ballots?
Who explained it to you?
A variety of people.
Can you name any of them?
Sure. Secretary of State.
Okay. Mr. Browning. Okay. It's just a coincidence that this same kind of law is being passed in other states where Republicans have the legislature and are governors.
I don't think about other states. I think about Florida.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Rhonda. Sorry.
Well, speaking of Florida, Florida leads the nation in mortgage delinquencies, and we consistently rank in the top 5 for foreclosures. Yet we've heard very little from you or your administration on this particularly critical issue in Florida. So can you tell us what ideas you may have for addressing the state's foreclosure crisis?
Sure. The foreclosure crisis is only going to fix when we get more jobs. The only thing that can fix it is when more people have jobs. So my focus is job creation. If we continue the path we're going on, where we've been adding 9,000 or 10,000 net jobs a month, that's what's going to fix the foreclosure problem. There's nothing else that's going to fix it.
If there is a non-judicial foreclosure bill passed by the legislature in the next session, would you sign that?
I'd have to see the bill, but I think it makes a lot of sense for new mortgages there be an option for a non-judicial foreclosure. I think the fact that it's taking 600 plus days to go through a foreclosure is actually hurting individuals' ability to get loans, because when a company wants to lend money and they have to say, gosh, I can lend money in the state that will go through the foreclosure process in a short period of time, or Florida, which is 600 days, I think I'll lend money in the other states.
What about giving the courts more money to deal with the foreclosures?
Well, we are. As you know, I've funded a lot of money in the courts this year. The courts have run out of money. They ran out of money 15 days after the session started.
Yes, but that's because so much of their budget now comes from foreclosure fees, and there was a lag in foreclosure filings because of all the fraud. And I'm curious about the comment you just made about banks and lending. Are you absolving the banks from any of the foreclosure problems that are going on?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if
you're talking about banks lending,
absolutely not. But if you think about it, if you're a bank and I want banks to want to lend money in Florida. All right?
Right.
If they have a choice between lending money in a state like Florida, where it takes 600 days to go through foreclosure, or a state that it takes a shorter period of time they're going to lend in the other state.
Would it surprise you to hear that judges in this county, which has a lot of foreclosures, say that one of the biggest problems in moving foreclosures through is that they can never get any contact from the banks themselves?
Well, look, I'm not going to absolve anybody from whatever they did wrong, that they should be held accountable. But I'm talking about going forward. I want banks to want to lend, or whoever. I want people to lend money in this state. They're not going to lend money if we make it difficult for them to get their money back.
But the banks are part of the problem. It's what judges here will tell you. They're ready. Everybody's set. They can't find a representative of the bank.
Okay. It's a totally different issue. I mean, that's an issue today of dealing with that foreclosure issue. You can tell you going forward, if you want to make sure that people want to continue to lend money to potential homeowners in our state, you don't make it to where we're at a competitive disadvantage.
Do you have any evidence, Governor, of banks making more home loans in states that have non-judicial foreclosures?
I know. I talked to banks that tell me that they have a very difficult time dealing with our state because of the fact it takes so long to get through foreclosure.
But I'm sorry, you're talking past the fact that the banks are part of the problem. You're saying you want the banks to come and lend money, but one reason, according to judges who handle foreclosures, is that banks themselves don't help the process.
No, they are delaying the foreclosures themselves.
It is the issue.
No, it's not. It's absolutely a separate issue. You have the issue that we've got to deal with the existing foreclosure process where it's not working. Okay? Now, it could be the banks, it could be the courts, it could be a lot of different things. But that's not working. Now, separately, going forward, if you want to have a system that we're not at a disadvantage to getting people to companies to lend money in Florida, one way you do it is you make sure that we have a logical foreclosure process. It's got to be fair, but judicial foreclosure will accelerate this. A non-judicial foreclosure will accelerate this, so banks won't, or whoever is going to lend, they will lend more money.
Based on what? I mean, again, if we look at it may be logical to you, but where is the evidence that a state with non-judicial foreclosures is moving
loans
foreclosures quickly, and where banks are lending money because of this?
Well, I mean, it's inherently obvious. If you're going to be a lender, and it's going to take you, if somebody doesn't pay their mortgage 2 years to get your money back, or you can get it back in a shorter period of time, where are you going to lend your money?
Governor, I just think that you're here not addressing the main problem. But let's put aside that disagreement. If this is such a big deal, what do you propose that Florida do? What should your administration do? Because you have proposed almost nothing in terms of foreclosure.
Well, step one is the thing that's going to have the biggest impact on the foreclosure crisis is jobs. If we can continue to, or people can get jobs, they can afford their mortgages, right? If they can't get jobs, they're never going to afford their mortgages. So the biggest thing we can do is step one, make sure people get jobs, and then they can afford to buy homes. After that, I want to make sure the state's in a position that banks and whoever else wants to lend money to our state.
And yet most objective economic studies say that the state won't really be able to generate many jobs until you solve the real estate foreclosure problem.
We generated 110,000 private sector jobs this year, and we went from a state that had lost jobs for 4 years in a row. So, something's working.
So, well, not in foreclosures. So aside from possibly non-judicial foreclosures and getting people jobs, you don't have an idea.
Well, jobs are coming back. We are dealing with the foreclosure issue. It's the number of homes in foreclosure is going down. The number of homes being sold in the state are up dramatically, and it's because that people can't afford homes.
Okay. Christine, want to go?
I'd like to just continue on the foreclosure crisis. Even if you give someone a job, if their home is underwater so much, they're not even going to want to pay their mortgage. And that's the situation that we've reached in Florida. So even creating jobs is not going to help that until you bring the real estate market up. People who are so far underwater, don't want to pay their mortgages anymore. So what is your plan now that we've reached that situation where even creating jobs is not necessarily going to keep people in their homes?
So, look, as the jobs come back and as more people move to the state, which, as you know, people are starting to move back to our state again, as that happens, there'll be more demand for these homes, right? As there's more demand, prices will either stabilize or go up, right? That's what's going to change this. There's no government program by itself that's going to change the value of our homes. The thing that's going to change the value of our homes is jobs.
On the jobs number, I just want to make sure I'm clear. The 700,000 jobs, I know this has come up elsewhere. When you took office in January, I think there were non-farm employment was 7.1 something million in the state. The 700,000 jobs, I know in the campaign you said would be on top of what a normal.
That's not true.
So you're just saying 700,000 added to the 7.1 million.
Right.
But there are, in the campaign, I remember this coming up in one of the debates where people said, are you talking about 700,000 or 700,000 on top of what normal growth would be?
I said 700,000 jobs, irrespective of what the economy does, up or down. And as you know, the economy is not getting better. In contrast to what's happened nationally, where unemployment has stayed flat for the year, our unemployment's gone from 12% down to 10.6%. We are now a state that lost jobs for 4 years. We're now number 2 in job creation, and last month we were number 1.
So, in other words, you can just add 700,000 to the number of jobs when you took office, and that would be meeting your goal, 7.8 million jobs.
Right.
Just a quick one before you go. You have talked about how unemployment has declined since you took office. The national unemployment rate went from 9.1 to 9.0, I think, in the last month. Does President Obama get any credit for that?
I mean, anything that happens nationally, sure. If you, I think that at the national level, the president gets either the credit or blame for what happens to unemployment, and at the state level, right or wrong, the governor does.
Okay.
I'd like to know if you think we need tougher ethics laws for public employees in the state. That's driving a lot of cynicism, I think, and you see it in the reader questions that we get.
Well, what we've done is I said that my administration, we don't take gifts. Tried to we set up a website. I think it's called Florida's Right to Know. So we're putting up more and more information on it because I think that the more information that a taxpayer has, they know how their dollars are being spent. So the things that I think are going to have a positive impact on perception of government, we're doing. And I'll continue to do it if somebody has additional ideas. But I think the biggest thing we can do is as much transparency as possible so taxpayers know how their dollars are being spent. And I think, like in my administration, we don't take gifts.
Governor, you just mentioned transparency, and on that website, Florida Has a Right to Know, you advocate for, quote, transparent outcome-based budgets. So do you agree with the method that the legislature used to slip the prison privatization in the budget instead of bringing it for an up or down vote where it could have gotten more debate?
Well, it goes in, I'm not somebody that's been in office a long time, so how they pass things is not something I've really focused on. I do believe that that prison privatization is something we have to look at, and if the private sector can do it less expensively with the same or better outcomes, we ought to be looking at it.
But that didn't answer my question.
Yeah, but
I'm not sure how they should do it.
I just told you how they did it. They slipped it into the budget, which is a must-pass item. They did not allow it for debate. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
I'm fine with how they did it.
Okay.
Okay. Last question, if we can. Why did you oppose the prescription drug database at first, and then why did you change your mind?
I didn't change my mind. What I said all along is that
You opposed it.
No, here's what I said.
Okay.
All right. What I said is that we should track this. We know the manufacturer, we know the distributor, and we know the doctor. That is the impact. That's the most important thing. Now, with regard to that one database, what I wanted to make sure was that we focused on privacy. My concern was that your prescription data is going to be up on a website, and let's make sure that we put the effort in to make sure that your information is going to be private. If you look at others like Virginia's, has already been hacked. So I don't think most of us want to know others to know what drugs we took.
Governor, you specifically said when you took office that you wanted the prescription database to be repealed. You wanted the legislature to repeal the law that created the database. You wanted to get rid of it. Then you changed your mind and you were in favor of it. So how can you now say you were not opposed to the database?
Because what I said all along was I was concerned about the privacy.
You did say that, and that's the reason why you said you wanted it to be repealed.
That's what I cared about, and the privacy issue was dealt with.
Are you going to, last question, are you going to announce your budget before Tea Party Group again this year?
I haven't decided.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.